I forgot to change the damn title out. Oh my god.
Cool.
Oh man.
I noticed it.
Oh,
Everyone's
man.
gonna notice it.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. I'm surprised that's the first time that's happened. I'll be honest with you. You know,
Yeah.
season. Oh man.
Well, welcome to DebateSensei, where we're on our game.
Oh yeah, we are a professional operation here, everybody. We got Matt Shapiro Esquire from his Esquire abode over there. You see that? Yeah.
I have a picture of a couch.
And many leather-bound books.
All right. We got Tim Seavey from San Diego State University, the San Diego State University. I am Jared Kubika Miller, your debate coach, professor, and we are here to talk about the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court.
Specifically.
Oye.
Newest member. Soon to be, hopefully.
It definitely looks like the newest member is going to be on there. Ketanji Brown Jackson nominated to the seat that is being vacated by Justice Breyer, who's old as sin. So he's got to get going. Yeah, he's got things to do, man. You know.
Right.
Yeah. So, and not just any. I mean, she's got a couple accolades, degree from Harvard and Harvard Law or whatever. But
or whatever.
She also has a national speech championship under her belt.
That's the reason I wanted to talk about this. Like when she got nominated, when she was like appointed as a federal judge, she also mentioned how important high school debate was to her, and so I wanted to. I don't know. I thought it was a good idea, kind of like wrap that into this discussion, and then we could, we'll talk about the Supreme Court.
Yep. So her high school is kind of a big deal, as I found. Miami Palmetto Senior High School has produced some significant folks, including Jeff Bezos, among others.
Jeffrey Bezos.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Go get it.
So they had just a hell of a powerhouse debate team, and I believe they still have a pretty significant program. But their former coach was just a huge deal, and she's Judge Brown has thanked her in Brown Jackson many speeches, has thanked her former speech debate coach, and like what a program that was created. And so she won a national championship in oratory back in the day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which is no small deal.
Do you happen to know what year it was, by any chance?
She was class of '88, so I'm guessing it was somewhere around there.
So around then, right?
Around then is my guess. Yeah, but and she also competed in interp, which is interesting.
Yeah. Like I saw she did like a humorous interpretation of some like Neil Simon.
Wow.
Yeah. So I mean, like triple threat. I mean, at least when it comes to speech and debate, if you're doing debate and interp and platform speeches, yeah, triple threat. I mean, she's got it all, man. Or at least that's how we see it.
And where has all of this come from? So like the process of becoming a Supreme Court justice also is a fairly debate-ridden process.
Yeah.
I would probably contend of a much lower order. It's several days of vicious cross-examination. And some folks say that cross-examination is some of the most important parts of debate. I love that part of debate just because there's not the same evidentiary backing, right? Like you're not building the case forever, or at least, I mean, the person asking the questions can build that up, but then it all gets settled real time, like the back and forth volley of questions and things, I think comes to be some of the most exciting parts of debate, in my opinion, at least to watch. And so this is several days of just Thunderdome style cross-examination.
We're in the cross-examination stage of my class right now, so it's kind of pretty timely. The questions back and forth, I think some of them are good, but then, man, there's just some people that are just grandstanding. You know what I mean? They're not really trying to. It actually does go both ways. I find myself having even lower tolerance listening.
What do you mean it goes both ways, Jared?
I mean that is that even when I'm listening to Democrats who are very favorable to it, right? Like I have a hard time sitting through it because it's just like showering with, like
softball questioning.
Yeah,
it's the opposite of Tim. Tim was saying like there is a very large segment of drilling or very pointed cross-examination kind of. But there's other large chunks of it that's very like, I'm not going to use the word pandering, but it's kind of like, and tell us how great you are, and it's very partisan. I mean, unfortunately, I think the word we haven't used yet. And I just wanted to ask you, Jared, like basically rhetorically, like when you say it goes both ways, not very long ago, a different Supreme Court justice was just selected and went through this whole process. And it's just kind of funny on whatever side you are on to kind of see how it's very political at this point. I mean, it's very political, and that's part of the process basically baked in at this point, which we're not necessarily there yet. But
man, it really is. One thing is, it's a pretty good measure of how fractured things are getting, because it used to be that while the cross-examination portion was pretty contentious, the actual voting wasn't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like there's just always just overwhelming agreement. It's kind of like, yes, this person is qualified, and boom, into stuff like that.
Right.
But I don't know. I got a theory that our politics have gotten worse as our communication technology has gotten better.
I mean, we all hear more and are exposed to more, which kind of forms opinions more, and
you can form communities.
More.
Yeah, you can form communities. I got friends who talk about how people who just never would have had any sort of group beforehand now. I mean, like the Flat Earth Society is a pretty good example of this. It's kind of like, just like how you could like build this society out of just ridiculousness. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, and we're, we got tens of thousands of people. We're going strong. It's kind of like you just kind of get emboldened to, just like extend this
fallacy to populism or something like that, or to the populace.
You don't have to listen to people if you could just find people that already agree with you.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And all platforms are financially incentivized to keep you seeing things that you agree with, because you're more likely to go and stay and keep clicking and keep scrolling.
And then
so long as you're fed stuff you like. So I think the echo chamber nature of these communities.
And we're talking about flat earthers on Facebook, but you zoom all the way out to the current, congressional hearings over Justice Jackson, and it's kind of like the same rhetorical devices being used, where it's kind of just echoing what the people who are watching, that you want to hear you say these things. They're just making sure those things get out, and it's kind of like on both sides. It reminds me, in debate, we're always talking about not letting two ships sail in the night, right? Like you want cannon fire, you want exchange, you want to interact with the other side, and it feels almost more like everyone's kind of just saying the points to kind of get the talking point on the television for tomorrow, and not really engaging in not so much partisan debate, but in this theory that we can transcend the partisan lines and actually talk about the things that maybe have a lot of nuance, and those issues that can hopefully kind of separate one justice from another beyond just red or blue or something so categorical.
Well, there was a few things that came up that I thought were really applicable to competitive debate. I thought there was some stuff I'm like, I see how that is. I see how that is. Like one thing,
and the justices are very much the most poised. I mean, I realize some of the justices have had some pretty outlandish hearings, but compared to a lot of the rhetoric and a lot of the speeches we hear from the executive branch and from the legislative branch, I typically would think that in general the justices try to be as debater in my mind, kind of like a,
Yeah.
I'm just cool, calm, and collected, and I'm here to say the facts, and that's all I'm here to do. That is an essence of the law and of being a judge and not being
Yeah.
biased.
Well, Judge Jackson, in particular, she has a background in being a public defender, and now that's
Right.
come up. And I think that one thing that reminds me of is in debate, you don't get to choose your side, you don't get to choose your topic.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so, like, people are trying to find, like, her some sort of insight into her
psyche,
philosophy by looking at her time defending, like, Guantanamo Bay, people. And so, but the thing is, like, you don't have, you take on that case and you're just supposed to argue it. It's like you're supposed to not assume that the lawyer is, like, personally invested in their position. It's just like, this is my job.
Yeah, and the role of a judge, I mean, it really is like a debate judge. I mean, tabula rasa, we use that word all the time here, right? And Justice Jackson, potential Supreme Court Justice Jackson, in the I didn't watch, all of the hearings, but I did hear quite a bit. And she was asked very specific questions regarding, like, her opinions. Like, I think it was Justice Kennedy maybe it was Lindsey Graham who said, or not Justice, Senator Kennedy, who says, do you have an opinion? He literally asked that question. They're talking about kind of something specific, but he asked her, do you have an opinion? And she goes, look, like, I don't really have an opinion. And if, I think about some things, but my opinions, even if I did have them, aren't relevant. And if I had this case in my courtroom, it wouldn't be my opinions that dictated these things. That is exactly like the role of a judge in debate, first of all. It reminded me of that. I thought it was really interesting to hear her say that because, that is very apolitical, right? That's like the opposite of what, so many people think of when they're asked questions like, do you have an opinion? It's like, of course I have an opinion. Let me tell it to you. Well, the advocates, the lawyers, for instance, or the debaters, but the lawyers, they're the ones who technically are throwing out the opinions. The justice or the judge is supposed to just be neutral, non-biased. Like, a role of the judge, a canon of being a judge is you are not partisan, you are not biased. So I thought Justice Jackson did a pretty good job of kind of saying that, because she expressly was asked, do you have opinions? Which, we all have opinions, but I mean, it's a silly question. But she did a good job of saying, you got to check your bias. She just outright said that, I have to, remove all biases and move forward. And that is the role of a judge in the high court, in any court, and in the debate space.
Is that real, though? So I'm asking for we'll ask Jared first, your opinion on the matter. Is that possible? Is tabula rasa real? Is it ever possible for a human being, no matter how high the court, to take their own opinion out of something and rule something objectively?
No, like, they can't. They could have, like, I like her explanation about.
So she's a liar, basically.
Yeah, I like her explanation that she has a method rather than a philosophy, though. That's what I like. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, my method. Like my when I apply my method, at some point I'm gonna have to use my opinion to, complete the method. You know what I mean? But that doesn't mean that your philosophy is sort of like etched in stone or something like that. That you're able to adapt. You're able to adapt a method a lot more than you can a philosophy, like like this framework or something like that you're looking at. So, and eventually, it's going to come down to opinion.
So, Matt, what do you think? Do you think that a judge can be truly unbiased and just like, I will take only the facts of the law and, adjudicate accordingly?
I have a couple kind of. First thing I want to say is this: it's funny because when an appellate court or the Supreme Court makes a decision and writes everything down, that is called an opinion.
An opinion.
Okay, so let me just clarify something. when they were talking to Justice Jackson today or the other day about having opinions, they're not asking if you've ever written down a judicial decision. They're asking her about, in your head, how do you feel about these issues? And the justice did her best, in my opinion, to say, look, in essence, kind of what Jared's saying, everyone has opinions, okay? But my job is to put that aside, listen to facts, and in a appellate court or a Supreme Court situation, what that means is they get to look at the testimony given in court and any sort of record, and using that, they apply the law, which the attorneys typically bring to the table and say, this is the reason, these are the facts, this is the law that I'm trying to do something with, whether for or against or civil or criminal, whatever. And the judge is supposed to, in a vacuum, look at these facts and look at that law and interpret. Okay, so when we talk about, do you think she brings her opinions into the courtroom or into her decision making? I do believe, as a human being who's full of bias and prejudice and all kinds of things, that it's our job, like the justice said, you check your bias. You gotta acknowledge that we're not perfect and kind of move forward in that space as best you can. Now, Jared just blatantly said, no, you cannot check your bias. I think the justices can, to a large extent, deal with facts and law. Okay? Now, the ironic part, the second part, the caveat to this is the Supreme Court of all the courts in the world, it's not like the speedometer on the crashed car says 65 and it crashed and the speedometer broke, so it's stuck there, and the speed limit is 55, and their opinion is whether they were speeding. Okay, a lot of times in the Supreme Court, the issues are much more politicized issues. Let's just put it that way. Where, as they were discussing in these hearings, a lot of power is given to the legislature and the executive branches to kind of make laws that are very political, essentially. But the court can be used in certain ways to make law which as we're talking about, the essence of what we're talking about is which stem from opinions of the justices of the court, which I'd like to believe come from the arguments made by the lawyers in their courtrooms. But at the end of the day, I think they are making decisions based on the facts that they are given and the law. And any mistakes made by attorneys or anyone along the process in the record, if it messes up your case,
Yeah, one of the things that comes up is everyone always wants to ask about judicial activism, which is just sort of a catchphrase that's used by anything you disagree with. That's really all it is. You know what I mean? Right. And so, I think I was listening to.
If they overturn Roe v. Wade, we'd say that's judicial activism, and if they, passed universal health care through a court decision, that would be judicial activism. No matter it goes kind of either way.
Yeah. So I liked how she made a differentiation between a philosophy and a methodology, right? Whereas, because that's what I've been kind of doing that with my sort of approach to judging as well, where I apply it to this universal audience sort of, the very Perlman-esque sort of approach where I'm
very omnipotent sort of approach.
I just thought, I'm like, who do I think would win in front of a general audience? And I think that's a little bit different than what a Supreme Court justice does. You know what I mean? So in a debate, I'm kind of like, if this were in front of, a fairly good sized group of people, who do I think would win in front of that audience? And so it does kind of take me out of it, but at the same time, I have an opinion on what I think, like 100 to 200 people would vote on that might or might not be right. You know what I mean? And so you're just going to have to accept it.
Speculation.
Yeah. And so
of what 200 people would say.
Yeah, but on a Supreme Court judge has a different approach to that, and her method, like she has like this 3-point methodology thing that she does for each one of her decisions.
Yeah,
and I'm like, I kind of like that. I really do.
Well,
it sounds good.
Speech and debate judges. I mean, obviously it's at a much lower level, but it's still fairly similar. I think that's where there's some of these tie-ins that we thought were kind of interesting as a subject of the role of a Supreme Court justice is kind of like a debate judge. They're just judging like the best debaters in the world, right? Like when you're getting solicitor generals and like, cases that have infinite prep time and infinite resources. So you can really get all the way through an issue theoretically. So you can get all the way down to what are the best possible ways to support or deny something. But to the point you were making a little bit earlier, Matt, I think they're not just interpreting, right? Because when decisions are made on keystone issues, on very paramount issues, that sets precedent. Like legal precedent has to be set at some level, and that's kind of why we have the Supreme Court. Is like local levels, if they botch it by whatever appellate decision, and then the appeals courts like don't quite do the thing they're looking for. Like that's the role of the Supreme Court, is to make a final ruling on something, and they can of course push it back or they can keep it as is. But they have the opportunity not to legislate, but still to create a new judicial precedent. And that's where I think opinion has to come in. And it's very much like the way that I think some debate judges will write their philosophies of like, here are the things that I believe, here are the things that I don't believe, these are the kinds of arguments I'll watch, these are the things that I won't. I'm not going to vote on just this particular subject, but I care about these kinds of things. So it's almost like when at the beginning of a debate round, debaters will ask a judge, what's your judging philosophy? Or oftentimes those philosophies exist on tab room or exist on some document elsewhere where judges have to put that thing out there so the debaters can craft their arguments to fit. It's sort of similar at the kind of highest level. So it sounds like her methodology is still in itself the way that we treat a judging philosophy. Like her judging philosophy isn't like, I believe that all arguments are valid, equally valid, or something like some ridiculously highfalutin thing. Like it still needs to be a process, so as to set forth like this is how I believe an argument should be tested. So I think like a good judging philosophy in speech and debate land should similarly follow a kind of flow chart, a pattern of these are the ways that I will evaluate an argument. These are the kinds of impacts that I weigh. These are the kinds of arguments that I listen to as more significant than others, etc.
Yeah, like when they try to nail. So the questions during these confirmation hearings, I don't know why they don't learn from. Well, I'm sure that they do, and they just don't care. You know what I mean? It's like they keep on asking the same dumbass hypothetical questions about how would you vote in this thing?
If they wanted to add a fundamental right, would you say yes? You tell me right now. Tell me right now. How do you feel about euthanasia? Is it a fundamental right? No? Yes?
And like
no,
I like a lot of her responses where it's kind of like
she was good. She was very cool, and she had a very positive like smile, but it wasn't like a F you smile. It was just kind of a tasteful smile occasionally, and she didn't make this face a lot. She didn't do that. That was good. I like the part where she didn't make an angry, frowning face. Sorry,
so
Jared.
The number of responses that were like, these things don't come up in my courtroom. I
like beer. My friends like beer.
Yeah.
Sometimes I drink too many beers. Sometimes they drink too many beers. I still like beer.
But that's the thing. Like, that's my favorite response. She's kind of like, well, there's a court case that's dealing with that right now. And that's it,
Yes. Or she said, "I don't know." Yeah. At one point, they're like, "How do you feel about this?" She's like, "I don't know." And it's like the best answer in the world. They're like, "Yeah, why would no one knows?" Like, some judge knows because it was their case, but like, she's not expected to know. I'm going to tell everyone a little secret. None of the Supreme Court justices who have ever existed knew every case in the book. None of them, not a single one. So people don't know, and it's a smart answer to say, "I don't know."
I mean, they ask, the gotcha questions though. I think the one that a lot of conservative media is going with is like when they say, "Can you define what a woman is?" She's like, "Nope, I can't do that. I know I'm one. Like I'm a woman, but besides that,
an interesting one.
Like, I mean, that's the best debater answer right there. So."
It was all gotcha questions. This was a gotcha question, and it was also just a straight comment that was not even a question, which really bothered me. But I believe it was Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham gets up there. He's like, "I have a question for you. Did you know, in like the '90s, that the Republicans tried to bring a black woman to the Supreme Court? Did you know that? Did you know that? And they ripped them up, and the Democrats ripped her apart. Did you know that? Did you know that?" And then she sat there like this. And he goes, "Actually, I really don't have a question." And then he moves on to another question and just makes this statement in like absolute just silence. And you know what? The reason why I bring it up, it brings me up to the first thing I said, where, you know, it's an aspect of it is very political in a negative way, and this notion that Lindsey Graham was hitting on is kind of interesting and important in that, you know,
Lindsey Graham was hitting on her?
Not hitting on her. Not hitting on her. He was hitting on a point that, like, this isn't the first time someone who is a woman and who is you know, black was proposed to was trying to be in the Supreme Court and actually going through the process of it. He's just bringing that up now as a political tool.
Yeah.
But he's also hearkening to the fact that, like, why are we arguing about these justices? I didn't follow his point. I wish he would have asked a question. I wish he would have asked a question.
The Republicans definitely are going down that sort of, what is it, the child pornography thing. They are, man.
That was crazy.
Oh my God.
That was as crazy as I love beer. I could not believe where they were going. And I thought she had a great point, I guess, but it was also like, oh my goodness, I just would not want to be answering this question right now. It was rough, man.
The goal, right, is to be able, like, when this would be the first ever public defender sitting on the Supreme Court, which is actually insane to me when you consider. Yeah, there's never.
When you consider, like, 10 of them have been district attorneys or something. I heard there's several on the other side.
The Supreme Court. I mean, I would just picture of all of the judges out there. A lot of them had to have been public defenders at some point or another. Like, that's a huge sector of the legal field. So I was really surprised to hear that. But then, you know, her work on, like, the the sentencing project and things like that. I think, like, there is just such a ripe opportunity in courts to have those kinds of discussions. But the fact that it hasn't come up yet, or like it hasn't come to the forefront yet, there is, I am sure, part of the reason is because you would have to defend different decisions or positions that you've backed. Like you said all the way at the very beginning, Jared, of, like, in a debate round, you don't get to choose your side, you don't get to choose the topic. And a public defender doesn't get to, here's the case, or maybe even if they do get the privilege of picking cases as, like, a higher up public defender, they're still picking, like, they're defending criminals or defending people that are accused of very, very serious crimes. Mm-hmm. And our country
right. Allegedly.
Allegedly, right? Like, people accused of very serious crimes. And so, of course, that's going to create just so much, muck to rake through. Like, oh, on such and such a date, you defended this person that was eventually convicted of, like, high treason or whatever. What do you have to say for yourself? Like, I don't know, everyone deserves a fair trial. Like, she has that capability of just answering the, like, flat, simple answer that doesn't back her into, like, why the case should have gone a different way or something like that. But it is a ripe ground for anyone opposed to her position to bring up those gnarly questions.
The View was picked that up and says, we want to know if she's soft on terrorism. I'm like, because she's a public defender? Like, I mean, like, what are you talking about? And, it's like, and she's treating it like it was this sort of gotcha moment. It's kind of like, yep, we knew it. She's soft on terror. Like,
look.
That's just bad faith. I think that's a bad faith argument. Like, you don't even believe it when you're saying it. You know what I mean? You're just saying because it's convenient. So, but I don't really want to do all that.
Those are the low-hanging fruit arguments to make, right? And I think Lindsey Graham also made a number of questions. Like, he brought them up because they were the same questions that were asked of Amy Coney Barrett, of, like, oh, well, she was asked this, so how would you respond to those things? Of, like, now the tables have turned. But I think that's interesting. Like, it's almost like a meta question where it's like the induction process has become so muddled that now we're having debates about that process in that process. Like they're making these justices try and answer for previous Supreme Court justice questionings. So I think that's maybe just a sign of how messy the entire system has got.
There is a truth though that like it's funny because I think we've hit on it with the presidential debates before, Jared, where there is, unlike in debate, where the last thing I should really be asking you about is your personal opinions and these very like how your religion and certain things like that. It does kind of matter in the United States federal government or a state government or something like that, where they're not completely ad hominem attacks. If there's an element where we want to know who you are because we're putting you in a position of very great power. So for as much as it's a muckrake, and I agree with you, Tim, there is a little bit of an aspect of like, to some extent, it's not. I guess is what I'm saying. To some extent, it's a valid question, although it can be the tone and the intention can lead it to a very ugly place.
But there was one that I was listening to this morning. I think it was Kennedy who was asking about a very specific sort of immigration thing where DHS was given like the absolute ability to.
It was like a New York case or something like that.
Yeah. And he's kind of like, how were you able to come to the conclusion that DHS wasn't allowed to do it, even though the law said that they were allowed to do it? I'm like, oh, that's a good question. And she's like, oh yeah, that law did, but there's another procedural law that says you have to do X, Y, and Z, and they don't get to just ignore that one. I'm like, that's a brilliant legal response. You know what I mean? And a fair legal question. You know what I mean? It's kind of like as long as he truly didn't know like the particulars of the case, but like there are some good questions I thought are really relevant, and tests the knowledge and sort of background and experience that the person sitting in front of them has. All right. Hey, well, there we go. All right. So we will see you again next week, everybody. We are Matt, Tim, and Jared from DebateSensei. Adios.
There you have it. Permutation.
Thank you.